The city had gone dark. Not the usual hum of streetlights and billboards, not the buzzing neon that made Times Square feel alive even at 2 a.m. Everything just stopped. I remember walking down 42nd Street, the shadows swallowing the crowds, the sounds of taxis reduced to distant echoes. That night, New York felt like it belonged to the night itself, like the city was holding its breath. Before we continue, drop your city and time in the comments, and thanks for listening to my story. Now, back to the story. I had a latte in my hand, the kind you get from a corner cafe near the Port Authority that's open 24/7. The blackout had shut them down too, but the aroma of coffee still lingered in the air. That's when I first saw him, or maybe when he first saw me. He was leaning against a lamppost, or at least where a lamppost should have been, looking more lost than anyone should in a city that never sleeps. His leather jacket was scratched, like he'd been through his own kind of war. I walked past him, pretending not to notice, but the way his eyes scanned the darkness, like he was searching for something he'd already lost, made me pause. "Hey," he said finally, voice rough but steady. You got a light?" I laughed, shaking my head. "You're out of luck tonight." The city had nothing. We both knew it. We ended up walking together, not because we planned to, not because we had anything in common, but because the blackout made strangers less strangers. The streets were empty, the usual chaos replaced by an eerie quiet, and somehow, sharing that silence made the world feel smaller. He told me his name was Ethan. I told him mine was Caroline. "Never met anyone like this in the city," he said at one point, his breath visible in the cold air. "It's like we're existing in some different world." And he was right. For that night, there were no emails, no bosses, no expectations, just the two of us wandering through Manhattan like ghosts. We laughed about the stupidest things, like arguing whether New Yorkers actually knew how to cook pasta, or if every pizza slice should come folded in half. Then came the moment we stopped at a diner that somehow still had power. Neon lights flickered above us as we sat in a booth in the corner. Ethan ordered pancakes. I went with coffee again. We didn't talk much at first, just watched each other, the kind of silence that doesn't feel uncomfortable, but inevitable. He shared things he'd never told anyone, how his father left when he was 13, how he carried guilt he didn't even know he deserved. I told him about losing my brother in a car accident, about how every relationship since then had felt like trying to patch a hole that would never close. It was effortless. We were both broken, and yet in that tiny, powerless diner booth, it felt like we could fix each other just by existing side by side. Hours passed unnoticed. We walked through Central Park, barefoot in the snow despite our shoes, laughing when we fell over the icy patches. The blackout gave us permission to act insane, and we did. We shared secrets, whispered dreams, fears, and everything else people usually hide in the back of their minds. "You know," he said, his voice softening, "I think I could have known you my whole life and never met anyone who gets it like you do." I wanted to tell him then, but I didn't. There was this tension, like time itself was holding us in suspension. Neither of us wanted to admit the truth, that we both had reasons we couldn't stay, reasons the world would take us from each other sooner than we could imagine. By the time the first hints of dawn crept over the skyline, the city started buzzing again. The power flickered, lights came back to life, and the world tried to reclaim us. We stood on the Brooklyn Bridge, watching the sunrise paint the East River in gold. "Promise me something," I said, holding on to the railing so I wouldn't fall over with the sudden rush of wind. "Promise me we'll meet again." Ethan nodded, eyes wet but defiant. "I promise. Next year. Same time, same place." We didn't exchange numbers, Didn't ask for last names, not then. There was a purity in not knowing each other fully, in letting the night be complete in itself. As the city woke up, he held my hand for the first and last time, and I felt the warmth of someone who'd become home in just a few hours. And as we turned to walk away, something in me knew. This was a love that didn't need time. Because some love is only meant for a night, and maybe that's enough. But the truth? The thing I didn't tell him, the thing he didn't tell me, neither of us was meant to see next year. I had cancer that was already advanced, and Ethan, he had a heart condition, something that no medicine could fix, something that would quietly take him before December ended. We both knew, deep down, that this night was our eternity. Yet, as the city came alive again, we smiled, we laughed, we held on to each other's warmth like it could save us. And maybe it did. For that night, at least. I woke up to the sound of sirens, the city alive in its chaotic symphony, the blackout now a distant memory. I walked to the corner where Ethan said he'd meet me, heart pounding, hope flickering. But the streets were normal again. Lights shone, taxis honked, and yet, he wasn't there. I waited. Minutes felt like hours. Hours like days. My hands shook, and the reality crept in slowly, unbearably. I should have been angry. I should have been confused. But the truth hit me harder than any betrayal ever could. Ethan had kept his promise in spirit. He had shown up in the city of chaos, and we had shared a night that could have lasted a lifetime. But he wasn't meant to survive the year. I found out later, through a mutual friend he had briefly mentioned, that Ethan had collapsed just 2 weeks after our night together, a congenital heart defect that no one knew he had. One moment alive, the next, gone. I sat in our diner booth alone, the scent of coffee mocking me, and cried, not just for him, but for the universe that had given me the most perfect night, knowing we had no tomorrow. And then it hit me. That night wasn't a tragedy. That night was a gift. I remembered the way he laughed when snow fell into our mouths, the way his eyes caught the sunlight over the East River, the way he held my hand as if he could stop the world from spinning too fast. We had loved fully, completely, without the need for years, without the chains of routine, without anything except presence. And maybe that was the point. Some love doesn't need to last forever to matter forever. Weeks later, I found a note tucked into the pages of a book he had left at the diner. It was short, handwritten. I could feel his breath on every line. Caroline, if you're reading this, then you're still there, still breathing. I want you to know that our night was enough. Remember it. Remember me. Live like we had more time, even if we didn't. Ethan. I held it to my chest and let the tears fall, because the weight of loss is nothing compared to the weight of having loved without limits, without regrets. I walked the same streets we had wandered, noticing small things, the flicker of neon, the sound of taxis, the quiet strength of the city waking up. Every corner whispered him. Every shadow held his memory. I started living differently after that night. I didn't wait for tomorrow. I didn't hold back love, laughter, or tears. I remembered Ethan in every heartbeat, in every choice, in every sunrise. Months passed, and the ache softened but never disappeared. I traveled more, laughed louder, and loved harder. And sometimes, when the night falls and the city slows, I swear I can hear his voice whispering over the East River, reminding me that some connections, some love, defy time itself. Because that night, we promised forever, and even though we meant goodbye, that promise still lives. It lives in me, in the warmth of a stranger's hand, in the quiet of the diner booth, in the hush before dawn when the city holds its breath again, and anything feels possible. Love doesn't always wait for permission, or time, or health. Sometimes it arrives in a single night and leaves a lifetime of echoes. And if you're lucky, even if just for a fleeting moment, you get to feel it fully. That night in New York, under the blackout, I learned what love really is. Not a guarantee, not forever in years, but forever in intensity, in presence, in the fire that burns even when the world turns its lights back on. And maybe that's all we need. That one night, that one love, that one promise. I'll always remember him. I'll always remember us. Because some goodbyes aren't the end. They're the proof that love, even in a fleeting night, can be enough to change everything.